stay out of the water. Could be aliens in there.
There are many things in the world that we don't fully understand, and possibly never will. One of those things are the oceans that fill up over 3/4 of the world. If you think about it, we do know that the oceans are there and that certain things about their composition and such, but we don't fully know what's in them.
Nope.
Because if you seriously looked up how much of the ocean we've mapped out, you'd see that it's only about 5%. That's not really a big number, and as such, we're still learning about the very scary monsters that live down there and that we should be glad are not amphibious. Just saying. With that in mind, here now are 20 terrifying sea monsters that actually exist.
That are not from this planet, probably.
Number 20. Anomalocaris.
The very first one. Look at this thing, bro.
Number 20.
Tell me that don't look like an alien.
Anomalocaris. For this first one, I'm going to cheat a little bit because of how this isn't really about a creature that actually exists, but rather was a creature that actually existed. I'm talking about an ancient creature to begin things, and not one that you may expect to be monstrous based on its side. The Anomalocaris, as it was called, was a creature that lived in a part of prehistory that goes far beyond what you're thinking, because this was not a creature that existed in the age of dinosaurs. Instead, it was one that lived well before the age of dinosaurs. Long before certain animal species would grow to be large sizes, the world was still kind of growing up and in the whole Cambrian period, which was about 500 million years ago, and one of the biggest apex predators was the Anomalocaris, and it was only about 1 meter long. That should give you some context for just how different the world was back then. If the apex predator of the ocean was a creature barely over 1 meter long at maximum. Some even think the average of this creature was half of that, but either way, it's a unique body shape that has helped to dominate the water, and some scientists have even gone so far as to say that it might be the first apex predator in history. It chased after its prey with undulating flaps on its sides,
and the looks is deceiving. You see that, you might think you got a chance at surviving this encounter.
Large fan-shaped tail, and it grabbed at them with large spiky arms. It bit into them with a square, tooth-lined mouth and tracked them with large stalked eyes. So yeah, the thing was the original monster of the depths, and technically, we don't have anything like it in today's world that we know of. Either way, it was part of a history that we should remember fondly, if for no other reason than this was a time when monsters were small, and they weren't all as small as we'd like them to be nowadays. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button, and click the notification bell right now, or this centipede will crawl on your face when you're sleeping. Now it's time for the fancy topic. According to certain people on the internet, NASA stopped exploring the ocean after finding this. And what was it that NASA was doing there? Well, there's some context that should be provided. You see, while NASA is all about exploring space, they do carefully time and plan their launches so that when certain parts of their shuttles and rockets and satellites and other things go up into the sky and then fall off as part of the natural process, they then splash down into the ocean where no one can get hurt. As such, incredibly important relics of NASA history are still at the bottom of the ocean right now, just waiting to be found. They couldn't find the Apollo 11 engines for decades, until Jeff Bezos, of all people, went and found them, and that guy has all the luck and all the money. According to this picture, NASA was doing some deep-sea diving for some of the parts that they had lost when they came across a creature like this, or something scary along those lines. Obviously, this picture is not a real photo of what happened for obvious reasons, but could NASA, or anyone else for that matter, have seen something that big in the oceans of our world? Well, here's where that fun twist comes into play. It's not as impossible as you would think. First of all, there are many creatures in this ocean that are of incredible size. The blue whale, for example, is about 100 feet in length, and there are both sharks and other whales that can measure anywhere from 20 to 80 feet depending on their species. Plus, as noted, because we've only mapped out about 5% of the ocean, there are places where giant creatures could be lurking, and if you don't know what they are, you may be inclined to point and say, well, that's a monster. As always, you can comment down below using the hashtag #FancyTopic and let us know your opinion in relation to what I just showed you on the screen. Number 19. Stingrays. After what I just put you through with that last one, I thought that I'd give you a more realistic one for the next entry. And while some of you may not think of stingrays as being monsters, they are creatures that you don't want to mess with unless you want a barb to be inside of your body. We'll begin with one way that stingrays are monster-like. They have bodies that not many other creatures in the ocean have. They feature flat bodies that move in very unique ways, and they almost fly through the water in order to get around, which has been the inspiration for many things, including Pokemon and others. But the biggest
I think a lot of people have forgotten how dangerous a stingray can be. I think that's because we've made them so fun and lovable. You know, come do your excursion, swim with the stingrays and things like that. But we forget that this thing can actually take you out.
Stingray ever caught was a freshwater stingray that was about 4 meters long and weighed over 300 kilograms. That's a really big stingray. The reason that most people would say that the species is monstrous is because of their tails. Their tail is often sharp, barbed, or serrated, depending on the species, and they're really good about sticking it to their prey where they want to. That's honestly one of the biggest dangers. It's not like a sword or a knife that cuts into you. It's a literal jab that will pierce inside and cause some extreme problems depending on where it may hit. The fact that some of these stingray species have venom in their tails, well, that doesn't help matters either.
Look at that.
Not to mention, they sometimes love to reside in freshwater areas and hide in the ocean's mud where people can accidentally step on them and become stabbed. It was a stingray that took the life of legendary wildman and conservationist Steve Irwin, as their tail spike went right into the gaps in his ribcage and punctured his heart. So, never let anyone tell you that these creatures cannot be deadly. Number 18. Japanese Spider Crab. I will fully admit that the next entry isn't monstrous and that it could kill you. I'm not even sure how the Japanese spider crab would be able to kill someone in the first place, but the reason that it's on this list is because of how it's the biggest crab species in the world in terms of its length, and there's no real reason why that happens. That might sound mean at first, but when you compare the length of the Japanese spider crab to others, it really feels as though this one is the odd one out.
I feel like these are the type of snow crab legs that we be getting nowadays. Anybody else looking at the legs and like, man, back in the day, snow crab legs used to be bigger. Now I feel like they're giving us Japanese crabs, or what is it? Japanese spider crab legs. That's what we get now, not snow crab legs. Sorry, I'm hungry.
The other mega crabs that are out there in the world are the coconut crab, and that's one of the largest because of bulk and not length. Which leaves you to ask, well, how big is this crab lengthwise? The record that's set by them is 3.7 meters from the leg end to leg end, and that's important to note because if you look at its core body, it's not really all that big by comparison, yet the legs have a really long reach. It may be weird, and it's freaked Japanese fishermen out when they first saw it. In fact, when they did first see it, they nicknamed the thing Crabzilla, and it's not hard to see why they would make that distinction. But despite its size, it's hardly the most aggressive creature in the ocean. In fact, it prefers to blend itself into the depths so that predators don't find it. And it has a hard exoskeleton to try and deter predators from sinking their teeth in. Yet you can't help but look at the thing and say that it's a monster, because there's literally no other crab that's like it, and it's not unlike what happened when the first Komodo dragon would be discovered. Because that's a lizard, but it far outscopes any lizard that you may know.
Komodo.
Number 17. The Blobfish. One may argue that the blobfish is not monstrous on its own, but instead is the byproduct of what we as humans have done to it. You see, many creatures on this list live in the deepest parts of the ocean. That's not really a secret. The catch is that humanity has wondered so much about how these creatures survive down there that they've tried to capture some of them and bring them to the surface. The blobfish, as it's officially known, was one such victim of that practice, and when it was brought to the surface, it was not able to handle the lack of pressure from the ocean, and so it became a rather ugly blob, hence
it looked like it's been swimming around in hazardous chemicals its entire life.
The name. That's really sad that we basically turned it into this monster ourselves. Number 16. East Pacific Red Octopus. Here's another creature that's not really something you should directly fear, but it's still no less monstrous when you realize how capable and frightening of a hunter it can be. The East Pacific Red Octopus is not the biggest fish in the sea, especially when you compare it to the rest of its kind. In fact, it's not even a meter long at max length, and its body is said to be multiple times smaller than its surrounding tentacles. So, what is it that makes it so monstrous that it deserves to be on this list? Well, that would be what it does when it finds its prey. First off, the East Pacific Red Octopus is a generalist predator, meaning that it goes after all kinds of prey versus just one singular kind. That's important to note because it also means that if it likes something, it's going to eat it, and that's a scary thought. But what's even more scary is what happens when it catches certain kinds of prey. First off, it's going to begin changing colors to signal its victory, proving that animals definitely have an ego, and then it's going to drill a hole through the shell of its prey to deliver venom and more easily open it up. That's right, the octopus has the ability to drill into shells and then inject its prey with venom so that it can't resist the further destruction. That's scary in all the ways that matter, because animals should never be able to drill into other animals, and yet this octopus does that on the regular. So maybe we should all be grateful that we don't have a shell. Number 15. Sea pigs. Now, there's one entity that's known as the sea pig that can be quite monstrous in their own right. For example, they can exist basically 5,000 meters below the sea level, and that is way down there, and yet they live there just fine. Alien. Secondly, they're known to feed on dead whales of the ocean, something you're going to learn about coming up in this video. Finally, they're known to embody the strength in numbers motif by having groups of hundreds as they move along the ocean. So, they're never alone, and that makes them quite the sight when you see their swarm. Number 14. Sea cucumber. Now, we know that on the surface, the sea cucumber doesn't seem like the most monstrous thing on this list, but trust me when I say that it has a reason for being here. That reason being that not only does it secrete a kind of toxin that can be harmful to you should you touch the thing, but it also has a very disgusting trait that has made it infamous. Specifically, if it thinks that a predator is coming, it will literally hurl its organs at them in an attempt to get out alive. There are some toxins that are in those organs, but frankly, it's just disgusting that they would do this. They should probably have some class.
Well, I know I wasn't the only one. We all thought that was poop, right? I still think that's poop.
Ass. Number 13. The Goblin Shark. Look, you may think that there are going to be a lot of sharks on this list because of their natural and monstrous nature, but you'd be wrong. We're casting a wide net here, but I needed to include the Goblin Shark for a few reasons. The first reason is that this creature is scary from an age standpoint, that age being about 125 million years old. No, they're not individually that old, but they're the last living members of a family that can trace back to that age, which makes them living fossils. The reason that's scary is that it raises the question of what else from that period of time may be swimming around in the oceans today. The other reason that it's on this list is because of its looks and abilities. First off, it doesn't look like any other shark you've seen before, and it's pretty scary looking, but when you hear about what its mouth can do, you may well freak out. Because not unlike a certain horror movie creature, the Goblin Shark can protrude its mouth outside of its head to bite down on its prey. That's right, it can go full-on xenomorph in order to get its prey, and that is wrong on so many levels. Thankfully, because of the depths of the ocean that it tends to be at, you'll likely not ever see it, but if you do, just go in the other direction. It's probably better that way.
It probably needs to be able to do that, because look at how long the nose of that shark is. So you gotta kind of stick your teeth out, because how are you eating with that big snout in the way? You know what I'm saying?
Number 12. Zombie worms. Before you go freaking out, you should know that I'm not talking about actual zombie worms or ones that could cause you to become a zombie should they get in you. I mean, we're not at the Last of Us stage of the world yet. But instead, I'm talking about a rather freaky type of worm that would be found by scientists and are known to eat the bones of the dead, specifically the bones of aquatic dead like whales. There are many elements to this story that are both fascinating and scary. I mean, first off, the worms can easily exist at 3,000 meters below sea level, which is pretty deep. Secondly, they can be either the size of an eyelash or be as long as your finger, and while it's not all that scary on its own, it should also be noted that the worms typically come in legions. And scientists noted that in every whale carcass they found, the worms were there. It's honestly a little bit of a mystery how the worms end up on the bones, but we might figure that out at a later time. It's also scary to find out that males of the species are known as kamikazes because they literally try to find other females, mate with them, and then when they run out of energy, they die. If only actual zombies died after running out of energy. Number 11. The Stonefish. I don't need to wax poetic about the stonefish for the very simple reason that this fish is a straight-up killer if you let it be. It's legitimately one of the most venomous things in the world, and it can absolutely kill a person if the antivenom that was developed isn't administered quickly. And the worst part about the monstrous stonefish is that they're one of many breeds of aquatic creatures that prefer the act of camouflage versus being an active predator. They'll allow the prey to come to them, and then it'll use its venomous spines to do the rest of the work. But that's where it puts humans in such danger. It's going to blend into the environment, and then they'll accidentally step on it, getting injected with its venom, and you'll be in pain until you get that anti-venom in the end. Number 10. The Atoya. I'm about to hit you with back-to-back worm posts, so you better be ready for that. Once again, I'm going to head to the realm of prehistoric times to discuss the Atoya, a worm that was about 15 centimeters in length at max and was actually a predator. So yeah, this was an aggressive worm. Wasn't there a movie about this kind of thing that starred Kevin Bacon? Regardless, what they do is make burrows in the shape of a U and then wait for prey to come just above the burrow, and then they'll lash out to get them. That's pretty scary when you think about it. Again, they weren't the biggest of worms, but to think that they were once willing to get aggressive in order to get food, well, we should all be glad that they've evolved ever since then. Number 9. Nery. When you have to deal with an entire species of scary animals, then you know you're in trouble. Though, ironically, the Nery, also known as ribbon worms, aren't the ones that would immediately strike fear into you when you see them. That's because you're not going to see them all that easily. After all, they are really, really small. Some of them can be only a few millimeters in length, and they can even live in the deepest parts of the ocean, so they're not exactly a threat to humans. However, because of their carnivorous nature, they can also use their small bodies to get into almost anywhere, which includes the bodies of their victims. One time, one of these worms got into a host, then slowly began to eat the eggs that the host laid, and that equaled out to about 50% of those eggs just on its own. Because of its makeup, the worms are also breaking off into pieces and then completely regrowing their bodies, as in each one of the fragments was being grown back into a full-on body. That makes these worms really hard to kill, which is pretty scary. Number 8. The Frilled Shark. Are you ready for the last shark entry in this video? It's not the great white, or even the hammerhead, it's a frilled shark. And what makes this one more worthy than the others? Well, it's not about worthiness so much. I mean, they're not Thor. Yet instead, I'm talking about some truly monstrous tendencies that the shark has. For example, like the Goblin Shark, the frilled shark is a living fossil, and you can tell that rather easily by the way its body looks and how it moves. It doesn't have many of the typical fins that sharks will have. In fact, its body is known to be more like an eel than anything else. It carries over into how it moves, because instead of swimming like a shark, it wiggles and moves its body like an eel so that it can get closer to its prey, lunge at them, and then swallow the prey whole. In fact, they're so confident in their abilities that they'll even go after bigger fish than them and try to swallow them whole as well. So here again, we have a case of history delivering something to the present that isn't exactly normal by our standards, and it's truly freaky as a result. Number 7. The Pacific Black Dragon. Almost anything that has the word dragon in its name has to at least be some kind of monstrous, right? I mean, after all, dragons were created to be some of the most powerful beasts in all of fantasy. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, the Pacific Black Dragon does fit into that model, as this is a deep-sea fish that is not only frightening to look at, but can also be quite the fierce predator, just like a dragon. As they are ambush predators, their bodies are dark black, and Even their stomachs are coated with black tissue in order to block out any light that may be produced by bioluminescent animals that they eat. So they hunt in the dark and go to great lengths to ensure that they stay there. This dragon knows what it's doing, but thankfully they're only about 60 centimeters at max, and thus they don't pose that much of a threat to humans. However, I wouldn't recommend that you try testing that theory out. Number 6. The anglerfish. There is so much scary stuff to talk about with the anglerfish that we could very easily dedicate much of this list to it. But for now, I'll focus on the main things. For example, the anglerfish is a deep-sea fish that lives in the midnight zone, meaning that it's part of the ocean where the natural sunlight above doesn't reach it. As such,
I don't think the anglerfish is from this planet either. I don't.
The anglerfish developed a unique evolution.
I mean, look at that. That's gotta be from like 10 planets away. Gotta be.
A protrusion that comes out of its head and lights up the ocean around it. Why is that scary? Well, it's not for itself. Instead, it uses that light to attract nearby fish. The fish will be drawn to the light as they're not used to it, and then, slowly, the anglerfish will come in and then chomp down. That's how it feeds on the regular, and if you're curious, yes, that's the fish that we saw in Finding Nemo in that one scene. Happy feeling gone. Oh, and if you want to know something even more freaky, the big anglerfish that you see are females. And where are the males? Well, they're minuscule and literally have to fuse themselves to the female so that they can mate. There's just so much that's wrong with this fish. Number 5. Flower urchins. When it comes to the more hidden monsters of the underwater world, you can't help but look at the flower urchin, because they're a creature that just looks like a kind of shriveled flower or mushroom when you approach it, and then if you are to provoke it, well, it's going to hurt you. Not unlike sea urchins, which also could have been on this list, they have spines that they use to prick and prod and break off in your body. So if you get hit with one, you're going to be hurting, and that goes double if you have a lot of them at once. Then, if you're unfortunate enough to step on one, you can actually be bitten by it and have the venom injected into your body. Now, while it is unlikely to kill you, it is likely to cause you a whole lot of pain. One man described it as actually feeling the toxin going through his bloodstream as it slowly paralyzed parts of his body. Again, he didn't die, but his face was paralyzed for about 6 hours. And had it been in a bad position, it could have actually led to him not being able to breathe. Yeah, you better be careful out there when these urchins are around. You may end up living longer. Number 4. Camra. The fish known as the Camra are technically a kind of living fossil given their ancestry, and they're closely related to sharks, which is why they technically look and move like one. But to be clear, they are not sharks. When you look at them though, you may quickly realize that this fish doesn't exactly look like anything else that's out there. It almost looks like something a little bit supernatural, which is why many have dubbed it to be the ghost shark. Curiously though, these fish actually prefer to live in the depths of the ocean, which is why many of you may not have heard of them. Found in the deep, dark depths of the ocean, these elusive fish have a specialized retractable jaw and can produce bioluminescent displays. But despite their ghostly appearance, they are not true sharks. They primarily feed on small invertebrates and are considered to be fascinating and mysterious in the underwater world, which showcases the diversity of life that thrives within the deep, deep sea.
So chill.
And it all just leaves you to wonder what else may be left out there to be discovered. Number 3. The barrel-eye fish. Sometimes a monstrous fish isn't monstrous at all because of how it acts in the deep, but instead it becomes monstrous because of how it looks.
I just want to call it the brain. I don't know why. And I feel like if this fish ever figures out how to become Caesar off the Planet of the Apes and develops a way to talk, like it's gonna be highly intelligent.
And simple. An example would be the barrel-eye fish, because it's a fish with a transparent head. Yes, the top part of the fish's head is transparent, and that is pretty well freaky, but why does it look that way in the first place?
Right.
Well, the answer is that, not unlike other fish on this list, it lives within the midnight zone. so light is not prevalent where it's at.
Like
The
its
transparent
eyes are
head works
closed.
perfectly with its upward-facing eyes, which it uses to literally look up and see silhouettes of any kind of predators that may be looking above. Yes, it's freaky looking, but it's also a fish that uses its form to help it to stay alive, and that's something to be respected. Number 2. The ocean sunfish. How about another fish that's a monster simply because of how it looks? The ocean sunfish is quite literally one of the biggest bony fish in the world. Not only can it be 3.3 meters in length, but it can also weigh about 1,000 kilograms. So yeah, just imagine swimming through the ocean, and then this thing just so happens to swim right next to you. You'll be doing a double take for sure. Plus, you're not going to be able to miss it thanks to its thin body. It has a rather squished frame, despite the mass that it's packing, and so it further stands out in the ocean. Also known as the mola mola, it's a peculiar looking fish that holds the title of the world's heaviest bony fish. It resembles a large floating disc with fins and can weigh anywhere up to 5,000 pounds, but despite its size, it's a gentle creature, feeding mostly upon jellyfish. It has a unique habit of basking near the ocean's surface, warming itself in the sun, and it's also known for its curious appearance and slow movements. It's a fascinating and peaceful giant of the seas that navigates the waters with an unusual charm that captivates marine enthusiasts worldwide. Number 1. The tasseled Wobbegong shark. Now, I do have one more shark to talk about, but for the record, this is yet another atypical shark that you may not be expecting. And the tasseled Wobbegong definitely will have you questioning what other kinds of sharks may be out there in the depths, given what this one looks like. In this case, the tasseled Wobbegong is one of a proud line of carpet sharks. What are those? Well, those are sharks that will line the bottom of a certain ocean place, blend in with its environment, and then snack on smaller fish that are dumb enough to get close to it. And as you can see, it's really good at blending in, which makes it really good at catching unsuspecting prey. So not only is it a shark, it's a very smart shark, and what's more terrifying than that?
Sniper.
That's all from the depths of the ocean where certain monsters do dwell, and you should be grateful that you don't have to deal with them every day. Which one of these sea monsters frightened you the most? And which one would you be up for seeing in person? Or perhaps there's another sea creature that could have easily fit on this list.